Okay.
I mean, they really got into it.
Got that going.
Hey, Ginger, when we start, I'm gonna refer to this. Just change this and then change it back.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hiya, Tara. Glad to see you back.
Hey, Danny, sorry, I had a family emergency, so I've been still here in Texas. I'm gonna be back in person next week.
Oh, okay. Well, good. Hi.
This is your weekly big book study reminder.
Who's that, Melissa?
Yeah.
She still needs a reminder after all these years.
That and two of my sponsees. I got one of them that's in the hospital right now. She just had surgery.
Hiya, Johnny. How are you?
I got Tom accepted.
Hey, Danny, how you?
Good. Make sure you let that Tom Adams in.
I got it all like.
Yeah, he should be here in a minute.
Yeah, he's in. Larry,
Okay.
how you doing, pal? Tom, how are you?
There we go. Hi, Danny. Doing exactly right. How are you doing?
Good, buddy. Nice to see you.
Thank you so much. Hey, John.
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Exactly right.
Good.
Your pictures came out great.
Hey. All right, guys, let's grab a seat. Welcome. Glad everybody's here. Anybody got any questions on what we've been talking about? What we've gone over so far? Nobody got any questions? Okay. All right, I think we're on page 50, right? We've been talking about, we've been stressing the part about believing is about hope, right? Rather than faith. It's not about faith. Again, you can't have faith in something you don't believe in. You have to first come to believe. And that's what we've been talking about. And where we're at in the book now, almost every page or almost every paragraph on every page is going to give you something to think about what you think about God. Okay. Oh, and before I forget, last week I had this up on the board. Jerry, read that, Jerry. Okay. So how many people read it like that? Raise your hand. Nobody else read it like that? What'd you say?
God is now here.
God is now here. God is now. Ye who have little faith. God is now here. It's just another way to look at it. It's the same thing. Just depends how you look at it, right? Like everything in life. Okay, we're on page 50. And remember, we're talking about believing being hope. So over here on page 50, it gives us the second paragraph. I think we read it already. It talks about the personal stories in the back of the book, and what is saying here is it's encouraging us to read all the stories in the back of the book. All the stories in the back of the book about step 2. They're all about the second step. Okay. It's how people find and get a relationship with their higher power. So the third paragraph says, on one proposition, however, these men and women are strikingly agreed. Every one of them has gained access to and believes in a power greater than himself. This power has in each case accomplished the miraculous, the humanly impossible. So miracle, I don't know if you've been paying attention, but there's a lot of miracles in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And there's a lot of miracles in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. So here we are on the bottom of the page. Here are thousands of men and women, worldly indeed. They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude toward that power, and to do certain simple things, there has been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of total failure of their human resources, they found that a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into them. This happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. What might the few simple requirements be?
12 steps.
Thank you. Who was that there?
Dan.
Not muted.
Oh, Dan, okay. Thank you, Dan. Yes, the 12 steps, simple requirements, okay? Once confused and baffled by seemingly futility of existence, they show the underlying reasons why we were making heavy going of life. Leaving aside the drink question, they tell why living was so unsatisfactory. So forget about alcohol and drugs. Forget about the addiction and of alcohol, or alcoholism, or the addiction of drugs. Not even talking about that. Life was very unsatisfactory. Why do you think that might be? Why these people are claiming to have such an unsatisfactory life, not considering the alcohol and the drugs? God wasn't in it. So that means if God wasn't in it, who was in it? That's right. They're in control. They're running the show. Self-control. And they show how the change came over them. When many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives, they present the powerful reason why one should have faith. Now, I know it says faith here, and I'm telling you over and over again, we're not talking about faith, but this is where you want to get to. Okay. So skip down to the last paragraph. He says, we ask ourselves this: are not some of us just as biased and unreasonable about the realm of the spirit as were the ancestors about the realm of the material? Even in the present century, American newspapers were afraid to print an account of the Wright brothers' first successful flight at Kitty Hawk. Had not all efforts at flight failed before? Did not Professor Langley's flying machine go to the bottom of the Potomac River? Was it not true that the best mathematical minds had proved man could never fly? Had not people said God had reserved this privilege to the birds? Only 30 years later, the conquest of air was almost an old story, and airplane travel was in full swing. Okay, so skip down now on page 52, the second paragraph. We had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems the same readiness to change our point of view. Now, this is the bedevilments here. I'm sure you've read them before, right? And one year, it was a long time ago, I don't remember when, and I'm not even sure where it was. I was doing a convention, I think I was down in Georgia or something like that, or somewhere down south I was, and there was another guy doing the convention with me, and he's a big circuit speaker, but he's a threefold guy. And we were out in the outside smoking cigarettes and just hanging out before meetings, and he said to me, "Geez, Dan, isn't it funny that they got us both here at the same convention?" I said, "No, why?" He said, "Well, you're a twofold guy and I'm a threefold guy." And I said, "You have the right to be wrong. I don't have a problem with that." And nobody else was there. It was just me and him. And I said to him, and to this day, he's still very big on the circuit and he still pushes the threefold thing. But I don't know how after the conversation we had, because I said to him, "Do me one favor." I said, "Just show me one place in the book where it, talks about a threefold disease, where, what you," and he took me to here, to this page 52, and he said, "The bedevilments." And he said, "Here, Danny, weren't we having trouble with our personal relationships? We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be real help to other people. Was not a basic solution of these bedevilments more important than whether we should see newsreels of lunar flight?" So he said, that's the spiritual part of the disease. I said, "Really? You skipped the first sentence." And the first sentence says, we had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems. Our human problems. The big book is calling the bedevilments human problems. They're not insinuating in any way that these bedevilments are part of a spiritual disease. That's somebody's personal interpretation of this. But the big book is plainly calling these bedevilments human problems. So I thought that would be enough to bring them over to the.
I got a couple of friends that haven't been here. Would you quickly define twofold and threefold disease?
A twofold disease is a disease of mind and body, mental and physical. And there's probably 130 or 140 times in the book that it talks about mind and body or mental and physical over and over again. There's nowhere in the book where it talks about a disease of mind, body, and spirit. A threefold disease. So, and when we went over that, we talked about, if the spirit in you, if the spirit of God in you is diseased, then you don't have a good enough God in your life, because the God in my life can't be diseased. You can't pass a disease to God. So, but there's nowhere in the book that enforces that. There's nowhere in the book that says that. There's a whole lot of people in the rooms that have that belief, and they go on that threefold theory, which is, it's not my job to convert them unless we're having a private conversation like me and this gentleman were. Vic?
So I don't want to wait out some weeks. It brought to mind on page 64, it says, resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than stands all forms of spiritual disease.
Yes,
We have
right,
we've not only been mentally and physically, we've been spiritually sick.
right. So over there, and I think we went over this, but we'll go over it again. It's okay. So that, people will quickly point that out. And they'll say right there, spiritual disease. But they're not talking about alcoholism. They're talking about resentment. He says, resentment is the number one offender that destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From what? From resentment. So from resentment, Mike? No, Jerry said God is nowhere. I said God is now here.
Well, you can do the same thing with the bedevilment, the bad evil.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mike. And then staying on page 64 for a minute, yes.
I mean, my wife's brand new to AA. We suffer from, but just like we suffer from a spiritual malady.
Yes,
And the solution is a spiritual fix.
yes,
I just wanted to point that out.
yeah,
In general.
yeah,
I mean, she's brand new.
yeah. You could go to YouTube
Yeah,
and pull this channel up and you'll pick up the first 11 weeks and we cover that.
right.
Where this is week 12, we're still on step 2. So you can see how much we talked about that.
Yeah.
If you're new, I really encourage you to go back and look at that.
Okay.
But let's stay on page 64 for a minute and talk about this again. So, and then he says here, from its stem all forms of spiritual disease, for we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. And we've done this before, but it's okay to do it again. So what he's talking about there, he's talking about the illness being mental and physical. And he's talking about sick. And in the way he's using this, it's kind of sick is kind of the results of. In other words, and I think I gave you this example before. I've never in my life, when I was home with the flu, and a friend called me up, how you feeling? I've always said, oh my God, I'm burning up. I got the chills. I can't keep running to the bathroom. I never said to anybody, oh, I have influenza. Right? So my point is, when somebody asks us something like this, we don't tell them about the disease, we tell them about the symptoms of the disease. And that's what Bill's doing here. He's saying that the illness is mental and physical, but the symptoms of that is what he's talking about here. Does that make sense to you? Yeah. So besides that one spot that it says disease, spiritual disease, there's nowhere else in the book that it says that. And of course, right there, they're talking about resentment, not alcoholism. So, but yet, like I said, I think there's 136 or 138 times in the book that it talks about mental and physical and mind and body. And when they wanted us to know something in this book, they repeat it in different ways and over again. And it's clear that they're talking about a disease of mind and body. Okay. Everybody on earth is spiritually sick. Everyone. If you're a human being, you are spiritually sick to greater and lesser degrees. Probably we're a little sicker than the normal people, but I'll give you that. But we're all spiritually sick. So being spiritually sick doesn't equate to being alcoholic. But being alcoholic does equate to being spiritually sick.
So Danny, then at the bottom of page 66, it says, we realize that people who wrong them are perhaps spiritually sick. So we do not like their symptoms and the way they described as they like us for sick too. Gary's just saying spiritually sick is a human condition.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, the bedevilments are you could take that, Jenny, right back to the bedevilments. The bedevilments cause that kind of stuff, right? And the book is saying these things are human problems. Okay. Did that help you out back there? Okay. And again, I encourage you guys to go to the YouTube and watch the early things. Okay, so we're back on page 52. So these bedevilments, they're human problems. So he says, when we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, capital, so talking about God, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did. See, one of our problems is we got to be in control, right? And how are you ever happy if you always have to be right and always have to be in control and you always have to prove something to somebody? How you ever happy like that? Who's giggling back there? All right, page 53. Let's go down to the second paragraph. When we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade, we had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be? That's a very powerful instruction there that he's given us. He's asking, again, almost every paragraph in here is they're asking us to take a look at what we think and believe about our higher power. So here's the thing, right? If you went to any AA meeting and you asked individually every person in the room, or any 12-step meeting, and you ask any person in the room, is God everything or is he nothing? I don't know if anybody's going to say he's nothing. You might find one person out of 100,000. I don't know. Everybody's going to say God is everything, because why? We know that's supposed to be the answer. All right? Yeah. But my question to people is, if God is everything, why is your life like this? If you really believe that God is everything, why are you living the way you're living? Why are you stuck and can't get out? What's the matter with you? If you really believe that God is everything, then you shouldn't. But don't forget that the root origin of the word, of the title of this chapter, agnostic, the root origin of that word is lack knowledge. Remember that, right? We talked about that already. So this is the thing. If God is everything, if God is nothing, based on what? If you say God is everything, then my question to you is based on what? And here's the problem. We skim through, we work with people, we sponsor them, and we skim right through this. We don't spend a lot of time talking about God. The book says we're going to talk about God. If that runs you out of the room, go ahead. I'm not going to say, no, don't leave. We won't talk about God no more. All right, if you're lucky enough to come back, we'll talk about God. Because that's what the book says we're going to do. We're going to talk about God, right? If you don't have any concept of what your God is and who your God is and what your relationship is to that, then how can you take the third step? How could you go to the next step and turn your will and your life over to the care of something you're not sure what it really is? Got the giggles back there today. It's okay. But you see where I'm going with this? We have to have some basis, which is going to be our exercise at the end of this, to get us onto the right path. And that's what they're talking about here. And that's what they're asking. Is God everything or is he nothing? What was our choice to be? And so you're going to say God is everything. And then I'm going to say based on what? Because if you're working with a newcomer and you ask them, is God everything? God's everything. Okay. Based on what? What does God mean to you? What is God? God is everything. God is love. God is everywhere. Generic bullshit. That's what it is. It's generic bullshit. Sure, God is everything. Sure, God is love. Sure, God is everywhere. I knew that when I crawled in here. I knew that when I was sitting at the bar. I knew that when I was sitting at the dope house. I knew that for a long time. Didn't stop me from getting loaded. Generic bullshit. We have to get a personal relationship with a power greater than ourselves. And don't forget the 2 qualifications according to the book. It has to be a power greater than ourselves, and it has to make sense to you. So God is everything or God is nothing. What's your choice to be? Now, if you ask me today what my God is, I can describe my God to you as if I'm describing anybody that I know. I'm not positive about the looks, but all the traits and personalities and characteristics and the relationship I can describe to a T. So the book says, arrived at this point, we were squarely confronted with the question of faith. We couldn't duck the issue. Some of us had already walked far over the bridge of reason, capitalized God, toward the desired shore of faith. So he's talking about trying to get to faith, right? But first you have to believe. Yes,
We're made in the image of God. Is that how you get your definition? We're made in the image of God. It says that in the Bible.
yeah, I don't have any problem with anybody thinking that at all. I'm not sure.
I was just wondering.
I'm not sure I buy into that.
I was just wondering how you.
For some of you, some bitches are real ugly, but.
How did you come to that conclusion?
What conclusion?
That every person you look at basically is, you didn't say you see God in, you said is God. I believe verbatim, is that?
Well, the book tells us that God is inevitably deep down in that God
The
is,
knowledge of God is written on every man's heart.
yeah, the knowledge of God. But that he also says in here, which we're going to read soon, is that God is here just as much as a friend is. That if I'm sure that Doug is here, then I'm sure that God is here. That's what the book is insinuating.
We're talking about that God who can remove the obsession, who can move mountains, who can a being who's not me. We play God. We run, that's a problem. We run
Yeah.
around playing God.
Yeah.
So I was just.
Well, you have to, and that's where faith comes in. See, believing is about hope and faith is knowing. And faith only comes with experience.
Yeah.
So when you're in here and you start doing the things and you start getting results from that, you start gaining experiences.
I just meant specifically what we were talking about, staying focused on who you believe God is and why you believe it. What's your source on that?
Well, so I go back,
Since we're talking real
me
much-
personally,
Yeah.
I don't have a problem sharing that with you guys. My personal belief in the higher powers, I'm born and raised a Roman Catholic, so I believe in Jesus.
Mhm.
But I don't believe in too much in the Bible and all the stuff in the Bible. So, but my God, when I talk about God, I'm visualizing Jesus and I'm talking about Jesus. But I've got a personal relationship with my God today. And so I don't, I had my oldest brother, he died a little over a year ago. He got sober. He was about 40 years sober, 42 years sober, never been to a meeting in his life, never even picked up a big book, born again Christian.
Amen.
Completely changed his life, worked for him. And him and I would argue all the time, as brothers do, right? And we'd argue all the time. And I'd say to him, because, he would say, the only way to heaven is through Jesus. Well, I believe in Jesus, but I believe that, God was so brilliant that he came to different people in different ways. And
Put a footnote there.
no, let me finish. Let me finish. Good. So I'm just going to share with you the main discussion I always had with my brother over and over the years. So I said to him one time, if you're telling me that there's this little Jewish guy over there that spent his whole life being a nice person, always looked out and did things for people, followed his religion, his faith, and never did anything bad or wrong, just was a nice person that always helped people. Are you going to tell me that he doesn't get to go to heaven? And my brother said, no. I said, then your guy's not big enough for me.
Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth.
I understand that.
No one comes to the
Right.
Father.
But we're in a, this is not a religious program. So we have to, it's your own concept of God.
I believe it.
Yeah.
You said you believe in Jesus. so
Yeah.
that's-
Now, I have never been, I'm gonna be 31 years sober this year. I have never been in a meeting ever, and a lot of you people have been in meetings with me, and you could, I've never shared about Jesus in a meeting. That's my personal thing. But this is not a meeting, and you asked me a question, and I answered it.
Okay.
But,
How long have you been sober?
Well, I knew that would come into play. And you know, the answer is not long, it's because I'm a lazy son of a bitch when it comes to doing the work.
Well-
Praising God and getting out of the way, scratching ego, and helping others. doing
Well-
the real stuff.
but the fact that you're here
Yeah,
means you want help.
that's right.
So, I'm glad you're here. Welcome.
Thank you.
This is not a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, by the way, just so you know. This is a private study, and you're welcome to it, but the reason it's not a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous is because we do things that not, sometimes we'll do exercises or read stuff that's not necessarily out of our literature. So, not to break the traditions, we just don't call this an AA meeting. Okay, so, but anyway, this book in this chapter that we're reading about tells us that we begin from where we're at, wherever we're at. We begin from there, okay? So what we want to do is press, change, and rearrange it, and that's going to be part of our exercise that we do to help us there. Well, let's go back to page 53. Oh, so I was going to tell you, so he said, when we talked about arrived at this point, I don't know how I got off the subject. I think Vic got me off the subject, damn it. I don't know, maybe 12 or 14 or 15 years ago, I did a convention in Scotland with Clancy. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Clancy. And so I flew to LA, and then me and Clancy flew to Scotland together. And I spent the whole weekend with him on the plane there and back. And I spoke Friday night, and Clancy spoke Saturday night. But I did a workshop Saturday. Clancy did a workshop Saturday. And when he did his workshop, if you can ever find his tape at one of these conventions on, he told a story about the invisible boat. Have you ever heard the invisible boat? Great story. And I don't do it as good as Clancy, so I'm not even going to try. But basically what it is the guy's walking down the beach, getting dark out, and he hears noise coming from this little island, partying, dancing, music, laughter. And on the beach, it's dead there. And so he sees a guy standing at the edge of the water, and he says to the guy, "Hey, how do you get over there to the island?" The guy said, "Oh, I'll take you there, get in the boat." And the guy looks down, there's no boat there. He said, "What?" The guy said, "Yeah, get in the boat." Come on, and the guy gets in like this, and then the guy says, "Oh, what the hell?" And he goes like this too. And they start rowing. And as they're rowing, they're getting closer to the island. And as the closer to the island they get, the boat starts to appear. Now Clancy does it a 20-minute version of that, I just gave you the 2-minute version of that, but he's got it on tape. You should get it. It's a really good story. But that's what it's about. It's about getting in the invisible boat. And if you're new, you're in the invisible boat because you don't know where this is going to take you. You only know what we're saying and what the promises that you read in the book, but you don't know. But you're starting out now, and you've arrived at this point where, if you're in the book, at this part of the book, where you're asked to ask yourself, well, what is this higher power? Who is this higher power? What does it mean to me? So these are questions and answers, okay? Let's go over to page 54. First paragraph says, "We found too that we had been worshipers. What a state of mental gooseflesh that used to bring on. Had we not variously worshiped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves? And then with a better motive, had we not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, or a flower?" So you guys have read this before, haven't you? I got a question for you. Oh, Melissa's not here, so she won't yell out the answer. For the rest of you, don't yell out the answer if you're not. My question to you is this: what is the better motive? It says, had we not variously worshiped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves, and then with a better motive, had we not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, or a flower? What is the better motive? Anybody? Put your hand up, want to answer it? Huh? I'm glad to say how, because I thought you said gravity. And I was like, the hell was that supposed to mean?
Beauty,
Gratitude?
beauty?
Beauty? Was that your answer, or are you calling me?
Don't know.
So check it out. Now, this is my interpretation of this. This is not, I can't back this up, this answer up out of the book. That's what I believe. I like it, works for me. I believe that the better motive is, have you ever made anything? Have you ever created anything, made anything? When you're done making something, whatever it may be, a dinner, or a piece of furniture, or a house, or whatever, whatever you made, right? A pottery thing, anything. When you're done with it, you step back and you go, wow, that's cool. I did that. So I'm not the type of guy that worships a flower or the sunset. I'm not that type of guy. That's just not my character, to look at a sunset and go, oh my God. But there have been times that I have been awed by the beauty of a sunset, of flowers, of the ocean. And I think when those moments happen for me, and the longer I stay sober on this journey, the more they happen for me. And not just those things. I'm awed by lots of things I see today. But I believe that when those things happen to me, that it's the God that's in me that we're talking about, looking at his own creation and going, I made that, that's cool. You see, because God, right? And this is, again, just my concept. We need God, but God needs us too, doesn't he? Because how can God appreciate and experience all his creations if not through us? If we weren't here, how would God appreciate and experience all the wonders that he's built? So it's through us that he gets to experience these things. And again, this is just me. I'm just sharing it with you. So, yeah, I worship money and power and those things, but with a better motive. I worship the sunset and the flower and the ocean and things like that, right? Because in those times when I'm having open channel and I'm spiritually fit, that the God in me looks at these things and appreciates his own creation. And we both get to experience it. Not just me and not just God, both of us. Remember that reading a couple of weeks ago? God said, you need me and I need you. Right? So, yeah, God needs us too. And that's how I get to experience the sunset, the sea. Because I've been by myself, I couldn't give a shit what the sun looks like when it comes down, or the flowers, and none of that stuff. But I'm gonna tell you, one time I was in Japan, and I was at for many years I raised koi fish, and I was in Japan, and there was this beautiful koi pond and a giant Buddha. It must have been 12 feet tall, right? And I'm not into that religion, but I'm just talking about the beauty of what I saw, and I was awed. And I was there and and I said to myself, what good is all this if you don't have anybody to share it with? So, but I felt something there in that koi pond garden in Japan that just floored me. It was just beautiful. All right, back on page 54. So he says, who of us have not loved something or somebody? How much do these feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with pure reason? Little or nothing, we saw it last. Were not these things the tissue out of which our lives were constructed? Did not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence? It was impossible to say that we had no capacity for faith or love or worship. In one form or another, we had been living by faith and little less. So faith can be had, but it needs to be developed. And that's what we're doing now. We're trying to develop it, but we first have to come to believe, okay? All right. So let's go over to page 55. Now, the first paragraph says, yet we had been seeing another kind of flight, a spiritual liberation from this world. People who rose above their problems. They said, God made these things possible, and we only smiled. Why would we smile like that? Because we're stuck in playing God and being God ourselves, right? We had seen spiritual release, but like to tell ourselves it wasn't true. Now, this next paragraph is going to say almost the same things that it just said on page 54. Okay, it says, actually, we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God, but it may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, but in some form or other, it's there. So on page 54, he's saying, had not we variously worshiped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves, and now he's saying calamity, pomp, worship of other things. For faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives, and there you go with miracles again, are facts as old as man himself. So what he's saying here is that as long as man has been alive, God has been performing miracles for these people. He didn't stop 200 years ago. He didn't stop last February. He's still performing miracles right here and right now with you. You are a miracle in waiting. Some of you are already miracles. Some of you are just waiting for it. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup, just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly, doing a fourth step, but he was there. He was as much a fact as we were. So here, right here, the big book is making a point blank declaration that God is real and God is here, that God is now here. Because he's saying, sometimes we had to search fiercely, but he was there. He was as much a fact as we were. So it is a fact. Again, it's a fact that Ginger's here. You don't have to like that fact. You don't have to agree with that fact. You don't have to acknowledge that fact. But your dislike and your refusal to acknowledge something doesn't make it any less true. Just keeps you stupid. It is a fact that Ginger's here. I can see her, I can touch her, I can talk to her. She is here. This book is telling me that just as much of the fact that she is here, so is God. In no uncertain terms. Not playing with words, not giving you any maybes. Point blank declarations that she's here, so's God. He's here, so's God. You're here, so is God. He was there. He was as much a fact as we were. We found the great reality, God again, deep down within us. And the last analysis is only there that he may be found. It was so with us. So the fundamental idea of God is in us. That's what the book is saying. But he's saying that God is real and God is here. Right here, right now. So here's what we're talking about here. We can only clear the ground a bit. If our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, again, your old ideas, enables you to think honestly, encourages you to search diligently within yourself. Listen what this says, very important, pay attention. Then, if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. Listen to this. With this attitude, you cannot fail. So the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is saying that if you are able to sweep away your prejudice, your old ideas, and learn how to think honestly, if you can do that, that should encourage you to search diligently within yourself. Then if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. And with this attitude, you cannot fail. You want a guarantee for the dollar you throw in the basket? There it is right there. If you do these things and join us, you cannot fail. I don't care how drunk you were yesterday. I don't care how messed up your life is today. I don't care how lost and confused you are in your head right now. If you do these things and join us, you cannot fail. What else do you want from a book? What else do you want? What kind of promise and what kind of reassurance do you want from something? That's what this is offering you. And the amazing thing is, we don't know where we're going to get money to pay the rent. We don't know how we're going to eat tomorrow. We don't know where we're going to be and what's going to happen to us, but we'll still come in here and go, I don't know. I ain't buying into that bullshit. Trying to push that God on me. I knew they were religious nuts. So really, where you going when you leave here? I don't know. Right? We're dying. We're falling apart. Our life is shit. And we're still sitting up here going, I ain't going for that. I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to believe that. In this book, you will read the experience of a man who thought he was an atheist. His story is so interesting that some of it should be told now. His change of heart was dramatic, convincing, and moving. Our friend was a minister's son. He attended church school where he became rebellious at what he thought an overdose of religious education. For years thereafter, he was dogged by trouble and frustration, business failure, insanity, fatal illness, suicide. These calamities in his immediate family embittered and depressed him. Post-war disillusionment, ever more serious alcoholism, impending mental and physical collapse brought him to the point of self-destruction. And so he's laying in the hospital, right? And he yells out, if there is a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me. But later, alone in his room, he asked himself the question, is it possible that all these religious people I have known are wrong? While pondering the answer, he felt as though he lived in hell. Then, like a thunderbolt, a great thought came. It crowded out all else. Who are you to say there is no God? So you remember when we did the circle of knowledge? And we had that little tiny dot that was all the knowledge that I knew of the entire universe. Well, who are you to say there's no God? In all of this that you don't know, in all of that space that you don't know, certainly God can exist in somewhere that you don't know. And that's what it's telling us here. Who are you to say there's no God? This man recounts as he tumbled out of bed to his knees. In a few seconds, he was overwhelmed by a conviction of the presence of God. It poured over and through him with the certainty of majesty of great tide at flood. The barriers that had been built through the years were swept away. He stood in the presence of infinite power and love. He stepped from bridge to shore, or he stepped from the invisible boat onto the shore. For the first time, he lived in conscious companionship with his creator. So stepping from bridge to shore requires a little bit more than believing, right? There's some work we got to do. Thus, our friend's cornerstone was fixed in place. And on page 57, seemingly he could not drink even if he would. God had restored his sanity. What is this but a miracle of healing? Yet its elements are simple. Circumstances made him willing to believe. He humbly offered himself to his maker, then he knew. See, once he believed, then he knew. It says he humbly offered himself to his maker. In hope, believing, right? And then when he did, then he knew. That's faith. Even so, God restored us to all our right minds. To this man, the revelation was sudden. Some of us grow into it more slowly, but he has come to all who have honestly sought him. When we draw near to him, he disclosed himself to us, the invisible boat. We get in the boat, the island will appear. The boat will appear. Okay, so we've got enough time. Let's do this. Let's do the second step exercise. So if you got some pen and paper, what I want you to do is I want you to write down, before you start writing, let me explain the whole thing to you. I want you to write down what you think and believe about God. Now, I don't want you to write down what you think and believe God should be. I want you to write down just what you think and believe about God. Everything good and everything bad. Whatever you think and believe about God, good and bad. But again, it's not what you want God to be or you think God should be. It's what you really do believe about God. We have to start at a basis somewhere. And the basis is, what is it that you believe about? What is it you understand about the God of your understanding? All right, we talk about God of your understanding. What is it you understand about that God? So write that down. And I give you a few minutes to do that. When you go home later, you can spend more time on it, but get some basic stuff written down. And we're going to talk about it. Yes, yeah. As long as you think and if it's what you think and what you believe about God, but try not to be too generic. Like we said before, God is love. God is everywhere. God is all knowing, generic bullshit. Personal relationship with God. What is it that you think and believe about this God? What is it you understand about this God of your understanding? This is real important stuff. This is going to allow you to take the third step. This is going to allow you to truly turn your will and your life over to the care of this thing that you think and believe. And again, I don't expect you to have the whole list done in the next 5 minutes, but and I'm going to get a quick fresh shot of coffee while you're doing that. All right, so again, I don't expect you to have your whole list done so quickly, because I want you to really take time and think about it a little bit, but it's a really good exercise. So, anybody want to share their list real quick? Go ahead, Ricky.
I do have some generic, he's forgiving,
Okay, no, that's okay.
and he's loving, and he listens. But he doesn't always give me what I want, when I think I need it. He lets things happen on his time. And then he allows me to experience good and bad things. To teach me different purposes, to help me learn more about myself and others, and to help myself create boundaries. To allow me to be a better person.
Okay. How long you been sober, Rick?
4 years.
Okay, so, and that's a good list, and you'll finish working on that. If you're working with somebody new and they have a list similar to your list, they're full of shit, okay? So nobody comes in here and you get to this point, okay, make a list, and they got nothing negative about God on there. I look at that, I go, oh, you're full of shit, man. Take this list and do it over again. What do you mean? That's right. No, don't tell me you're not mad at God because God did something. Don't tell me that you don't think God is this or that. Something negative. Nobody comes here thinking God is so wonderful and so great. Yeah, somewhat, but there's got to be something negative on that list. Okay, very important, especially new people. I mean, I've seen guys list that have years of sobriety and they still got negative shit on there. You see, if I think that God is punished and God is vengeful, how can I possibly turn my will and my life over to him the next day? How can I possibly? I can't. I'll tell myself I do because that's what whoever's sponsoring me is telling me to do, right? But I really can't.
I'm not mad at God.
How long you been sober? 6 years? Well, you shouldn't be mad at
you
God
go.
anymore.
But I wasn't, I mean, I thought I did things that probably he was upset with me about, but I was never like, damn man, like.
No, but some people with their religious upbringing think like God is vengeful, God is judgmental, you know.
Danny, we've
Yes.
got somebody with their hand up in here.
Who's got their hand up there?
It's me, Tara.
Okay.
Danny, I've got a little, 3.5 years sober, and I have to admit, all of mine are negative.
That's okay.
Like why does he allow painful situations? If he's here, he doesn't care about me. Why do I have all these mental issues? He doesn't answer my prayers. So it was all, I couldn't find
No,
anything positive.
it's
And
okay. That's okay. We're not done with our exercise yet.
Okay.
Stick with me. We're gonna work that out. I'm glad you said that. Thank you. So, yeah, at 6 years sober, you know, you shouldn't have any qualms with God anymore, you know. But even when you got here, right? So a lot of religious upbringings or just dogma, people think God is judgment. Look, how many people believe God gave us free will? Okay. How many people think God is judgmental? Okay. Contradiction, isn't it? If he gave us free will, then why is he going to judge us? If he gave us free will and he's judging us, what is he up there going, oh, here goes that friggin' Doug again. I don't know why I gave him free will.
He says that shit a lot.
No. God gave us the right to be wrong. God gave us the right to do wrong. If you ever get a chance to read Emmett Fox's Sermon on the Mount, he explains what Jesus said on the mountain. He said, you know, that what he was really talking about is that you're gonna go to hell for your sins and your deeds, not when you die. Here now, you create a hell of your own living, right here, right now.
Absolutely.
And that's an interpretation that I like. So there's been some people I've met over the years that didn't really have any problems with God. And You know what, Tony, your dad was one. His dad was a great guy. His dad came in here to bring him into the rooms and wound up becoming a member himself. Great guy. But he was, I thought his dad was one of the nicest people I ever met. I thought but so there's a lot of people, but most people have some issues with God. And that's what we want to address. Amy?
Well, I like that idea.
That's right. Good point. That's exactly right.
So,
The hell of your own creation is when you can, if you created it, you can recreate something else.
So, and I'm just gonna say this from my own experience.
Okay.
Is when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't know what I believed.
Yeah.
I didn't know my conception of God either.
Okay.
I didn't discover the truth of that until later.
Okay. Fair enough. But you didn't finish, we're not finished with our exercise.
I know that.
Yeah.
I know.
So think about it, right? Because a lot of people didn't do anything like this when they got here. They really spend much time on step 2 talking about God. But if you did this, what we're doing right now, it wouldn't have been later. It would have been sooner. Maybe,
Maybe.
maybe not.
I was pretty far down the pit.
Carol?
Well, I was gonna say, a lot of times when people have a lot of problems, and I'm not an alcoholic, but I've gone through stuff in my life where I couldn't have a close relationship with God upstairs until I was able to forgive myself.
Okay.
He was able to forgive
And that's
me.
part of the process of the steps. Yeah.
Once I was able to go through my 12-step program, I was able to learn that God's forgiven me. Now I have to forgive myself. And then because I was never mad at God.
Oh, you see, there you go. Okay. So there you go. If God forgave you, that means he judged you.
I felt like he was
Yeah.
judging me.
So my point is, if God gave us free will, there's no judgment there.
Right, but I had to forgive.
Do what you want. You want to be happy? Probably not do that shit no more. Okay. So we only got a couple of minutes left, but here's the rest of the assignment. And I want you to do this over the week. So next week we can finish this off and we'll move on to the 3rd step. So after you finish your list, everything you think and believe about God, I want you to go through that list and I want you to cross out any of the negative stuff that you see there. Even if you believe God is judgmental, cross it out. Because we're going to create a God of our own understanding. Okay? And then, if there's something that you would like your God to be, but you don't think he is or don't believe he is, put it on the list. So we're going to press, change, and rearrange. We're going to take out all the negative stuff about God and add any positive stuff that we don't believe now, but we'd like God to be. For instance, with me, I wanted God to have a sense of humor. When I got here, I didn't think he did. And now I realize, holy shit, he's got a hell of a sense of humor. Right? But I didn't really think so. So I added that on my list when I first got here. Okay. So that's all the time we got. But please do this exercise. It's going to help you. It's going to help you to help the next person down the road. Press, change, and rearrange. We're going to go over some of your lists next week. Thank you. All right, guys. Tara, especially you, that press, change, and rearrange that list.
Yes, have to do that.
Cross out of stuff we're gonna have nothing on our list.
Thanks, Danny.
Thanks, Danny.
Thanks, Danny.
I think there is a Jeff on there.
Yeah.
Thanks, Danny.
So long, guys. See you.
Bye,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Danny. Have a good weekend.
Have a good night, guys.
Hey, Danny, what was that you said? What was the name of that book?